So a little while ago, conservative YouTuber Matt Walsh went on the Dr. Phil show, and he had a little conversation slash debate with a non-binary couple, Ethan and Addison, who Ethan identifies as he and they, and Addison identifies as they and them. And at the start of the video, Ethan and Addison speak a little bit about their pronouns, their history, how they prefer to be identified. And then Matt Walsh steps in. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, you just saw my next guest, author and conservative host of Daily Wire's The Matt Walsh Show, talking about his recently published children's book that has since been removed online by a popular large retail chain. Now, Matt says gender is not a social construct, but rooted firmly in biology. True?
True.
All right, so Dr. Phil speaks on behalf of Matt and asks Matt if gender is not a social construct but rooted firmly in biology, and Matt assents to this. Now, obviously definitions can change, they have before and they will in the future, and I don't even really know what it means to say that a definition is wrong. It seems nonsensical to me. It's just how we use tokens. It seems like when Matt says that gender is not a social construct, he is presupposing his definition of gender. There are examples of gender which are dictated, at least in part, seemingly by society. One of them is given by Katherine Jenkins, who says that to be a woman means to have some sort of internal map that they take to be applicable to them, even if they don't actually act on it. Under this understanding, gender is dictated, presumably at least in part, by society. She states her understanding of woman as follows. S has a female gender identity if and only if S's internal map is formed to guide someone classed as a woman through the social or material realities that are, in that context, characteristic of women as a class. That is, if someone feels compelled by whatever reason to say, let's say, wear makeup or wear a dress, that counts in favor of them being classed as a woman, even if they don't actually perform those actions of wearing a dress and wearing makeup. There is a slight issue here in that the term woman is included in the definition, but I take Jenkins just to mean that woman in the definition to be referring to someone who takes on those roles like wearing a dress, etc. Interestingly as well, the World Health Organization also uses a definition that is reliant heavily on society. They say that they define gender as the characteristics of women, men, boys and girls that are socially constructed. This includes norms, behaviors and roles associated with being a woman, man, boy or girl, as well as relationships with each other. As a social construct, gender varies from society to society and can change over time. So under this understanding, if women and girls typically prefer, let's say, pink, then gender may actually be, at least in part, determined by preference and social constructs. Although I think there is much more that goes on in gender than just preference and social construct. My point here, though, cuts both ways. I'm not saying that Matt's understanding of gender is wrong. Like I said, I don't really know what it means for a definition to be wrong. What I am saying is that Addison's understanding of gender is also valid. And saying that gender is rooted in biology is just not understanding the idea that definitions and understandings of these terms can change. Okay, so let's see what Matt says next.
Absolutely. Well, actually, just to clarify, and with all due respect, but most of what we just heard in the previous segment was total nonsense, which is why when you were pushing for definitions and that sort of thing, they were not able to provide it because it's just nonsensical. Sex, well, as human beings...
All right, so Matt says that when Dr. Phil was pressing for definitions, that is a definition of a woman and man and stuff, Addison and Ethan were not able to provide them, seemingly drawing the conclusion that the position is nonsensical. It is really unclear how Matt was able to draw that inference because in my view, there are many concepts which are very difficult or impossible to articulate, yet are absolutely not nonsensical. There are such things as semantic primitives, which can't be broken down further. For instance, words like part, time, or very are terms that are proposed to be primitive, meaning that they can't be broken down any further, but nevertheless, we do have an understanding of what they mean. There are also notions which are said to be family resemblances, made popular by the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein. Take, for example, the idea of a game, which is an example that Wittgenstein uses. Now, when I say that I'm playing a game, you may very well have a concept in mind as to what it means to say I am playing a game. But if I ask you to tell me exactly what game means, it's going to be very tough. You may say that a game is an action in which two or more people play to challenge and outmatch each other in a certain skill. Yet there are very many games where only one person plays and there may be no skill involved at all. And so the idea is that if you look at all the things that we consider games, there are going to be similarities between them, but those similarities are not always going to appear in every one of those games. So it should be easy to see just why it's tough to define terms that are family resemblances, as there's no necessary conditions constituting something being part of that family resemblance or not. There's nothing that appears in every single game that makes a game a game. So we should see the relevance of this when it comes to gender, as I do take gender to be a family resemblance. If we understand gender in this way, then there's not going to be one clear-cut answer as to what makes a woman as opposed to not a woman, just like there may not be one clear-cut criterion to make one thing a game as opposed to not a game. If anyone is interested in this topic, I find it really interesting. I'll link Wittgenstein speaking about family resemblances in the description. All right, let's move on.
Words have gender. People don't.
You're saying that there should be no construct of gender, just sex. You're either male or female.
Right.
And someone feeling in a mental, emotional way that they don't identify with the sex that they have been biologically created as and assigned at birth based on their genitalia. If they don't feel that way, that there's no construct that describes that, experiences that.
Well, that's got nothing to do with the realities. You can feel however you want. I mean, I could sit here and say that I feel like a tomato plant, but that doesn't mean that I'm actually in those things. So your self-perception, you can have whatever self-perception you want, but you can't expect me to take part in that self-perception or to take part in this kind of charade, this theatrical production. You don't get your own pronouns, just like you don't get your own prepositions or your own adjectives. You know, it's like if I were to tell you, my adjectives are handsome and brilliant, and no matter whenever you're talking about me, you have to describe me as handsome and brilliant because that's how I identify. It makes no sense. You don't get your own pronouns. That's grammar. That's language.
So you think it's a delusion? Someone is self-delusional.
Yeah, I think it's delusion. It could be mental illness. It could be it's a lot of different. With children. Wow.
Okay, now I've watched the entire video, and from what I saw, neither Addison or Ethan seem to be under any delusions at all. It's unclear what false belief they're going to have. Matt might want to say that something like the false belief is that they're a woman or they're not a man or something like that. But again, if he's using the terms biological man and woman, referring to gametes and chromosomes and things like that, I don't think Addison or Ethan are under any delusions about what their biological states are. And in fact, no transgender person I've met is under any delusions as to what their biological sex is. They just use gender, man and woman, to refer to something other than biological sex. And so to say that they're delusional because they're not a woman but woman refers to biology, is just to talk past the other person.
You know, there's also just a basic confusion that all kids have. Like, that's why when you hear someone, a parent say, "Oh, my 4-year-old son came to me and said that I'm a girl now, and so that's what I'm gonna raise him as a girl." No, you're a 4-year-old. I have 4 kids. When a 4-year-old boy comes to you and says, "Oh, I'm a girl," here's a good follow-up question: what is a girl? Ask him what he means by that. What do you mean by girl? And when you ask him that, here's what he'll tell you. He will tell you what he really means is that he wants to do some of the things that girls do, like play with the dollhouse, or you know, he likes the color pink. That's fine. Play with the dollhouse, but you're still a boy. And that's a question I would like to throw out to other members of the panel, actually, because just like the 4-year-old can't answer what is a girl. Well, this is one of the problems with this left-wing gender ideology, is that no one who espouses it can even tell you what these words mean. It's like, what is a woman?
Well,
can you tell me what a woman is?
No, I can't. Because it's not for me to say. Womanhood looks different for everybody.
What do you define a woman as?
An adult human female.
And what does a female mean?
Well,
how
that's
do you define a female?
someone with female reproductive organs.
Okay.
Someone who's, here's the thing, when you're a female, it goes right down to your bones, your DNA. So that's why if someone dies,
Okay.
we could dig up their bones 100 years from now. We have no idea what they believed in their head, but we can tell what sex they were because it's ingrained in every fiber of their being.
Interesting. So I'm trying to understand. Your definition is that a woman is someone who is female, you said, right?
Correct. Is
Okay.
a biological female.
So what happens if we have maybe someone who is female, identifies as a woman, right? You know, cisgender woman, right? As you just explained, but maybe doesn't have the ability to reproduce. Maybe doesn't have those organs that you're talking about that are reproductive organs.
I have answered the question. You stood up here and said trans women are women.
Yes.
Tell me what you mean. What is a woman?
Womanhood is something that, just as Ethan explained, I cannot define because I am not
But
myself.
you used the word, so what did you mean when you said trans women are women if you don't know what it means?
Right? So here's the thing. So I do not define what a woman is because I do not identify as a woman. Womanhood is something that is an umbrella term. It includes people
That describes what?
who identify as a woman.
Identify as what?
As a woman.
What is that?
Was to each their own. Each woman, each man, each person is going to have a different relation with their own gender identity and define it differently.
That doesn't-
And so
I'm not
trans
asking.
women are
Alright, so it seems like Addison's using more of a primitive notion of what a woman is. And so one thing I want to add here is that when somebody doesn't know what a term means, and they ask, for example, what is a woman, and they say, well, a woman refers to someone who identifies as a woman. Well, if the person asking the question doesn't already share that concept of what a woman is, then they're not going to get clear on what a woman actually is. It's like if I said, oh, I'm a blah blah, and you ask me what's a blah blah, and I say, well, a blah blah is when you identify as a blah blah. Well, I think it's perfectly legitimate in that case to ask me, well, what do you mean by blah blah? And that's not to say that you can't use primitive notions. I think you totally can. But I think if you do, if a person doesn't share that primitive notion of what it's like to be a woman, then it's totally fair to not understand what it's like to be a woman. Unless you can try and find some way to convey that. Alright, so I guess if there's one takeaway from this I want to get across is that if someone can't exactly articulate what they mean by a term, that doesn't necessarily mean that the term they're using is nonsensical or that they're delusional or anything like that. And Matt seems to think that if someone can't articulate exactly what they mean by a term, that therefore that means that they are delusional or that they make no sense. And I bet if someone asked Matt, for example, if he has a table at home, he would probably say yes. But then if you asked him, what does it mean for something to be a table? He probably won't be able to define exactly what that is. And that's not a knock against him. I can't define it very easily either. I could give some broad ideas as to what constitutes a table. Like, often a table will have 4 legs. It's mostly used for writing, yet not everything used for writing is a table. Sometimes they have drawers, sometimes no. But I'm not going to be able to give one clear thing that makes a table a table. There are many tables with 3 legs, there are many tables with 8 legs. And the reason that I can't give one specific thing that makes a table is because I don't think there is one specific thing that makes a table a table. So when Ethan couldn't answer what a woman is, that does not mean that they have a nonsensical notion. It just means that they may not have a concept in mind that they can fully articulate. Just like in the example of a game, or a chair, or a book, or a table, or even a person, these concepts may be intelligible for the person using them without necessarily being able to easily articulate.